This lesson will be one in a series of lessons about the value of an education. We will seek answers to the question, why should we go to school? In this particular lesson, the idea will be an education allows you to look with new eyes. Now that phrase can be traced to a quote from a now dead author. The only true voyage of discovery would be not to visit strange lands, but to possess other eyes, to behold the universe through the eyes of another, like the eyes of a scientist, for example. We can boil that quote down to the following: discovery is not only about traveling to new places, but is often about looking with new eyes. And this is what an education can do for you. It can equip you with new eyes with which to see the same old world in a new way. And this characterizes a lot of the history of science, where great strides were made in understanding our world, but it wasn't so much we discovered new things. It's often the case that we discover new ways of understanding the old stuff that we were interacting with, or we were familiar with. So I'm going to offer two examples of looking with new eyes, and the first example will be chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are these green structures inside plant cells. So up here at the top right, we have a leaf, and it was just after a rainfall, so we've got some nice beads of water on the leaf here. But if we put a leaf under the microscope, we will see that leaves are made of these chambers that we call cells. These cells are living things, and what makes them green is they have these green discs inside them. These are the chloroplasts. Notice then, the green of the leaf is not due to the fluid. The fluid inside the cell is not green. It's these green discs. Now, chloroplasts are really, really important structures because they are the site of photosynthesis, and this is one of the most important chemical processes on planet Earth. What is photosynthesis? Well, here's the basic equation of photosynthesis, where living things that have chloroplasts can utilize simple, abundant materials in their environment, carbon dioxide and water molecules, and they can break the chemical bonds of these molecules and rearrange those atoms to make a new molecule, a sugar called glucose. And that sugar is really important because it's the food for many living things on planet Earth. Plants and animals use glucose as their main energy supply. This chemistry releases oxygen as a waste product. Now, if the plant lives on the land, that it gets its carbon dioxide out of the air. If it lives in the water, it'll get its carbon dioxide that is dissolved in the water. And likewise for the waste oxygen, either released into the air or the water. Now, the energy to do this chemistry comes from the sun. So organisms that perform photosynthesis have evolved a way to capture the energy of the sun to power this complex chemistry. And why is this so important? Is now it means that living things can make their own food. They didn't have to eat other things, other molecules in the environment, for example, but now they could absorb energy from the sun and use that energy to build their own food. A really cool trick for some living things on planet Earth. Now, another reason photosynthesis is so important is that organisms that photosynthesize are at the bottoms of the food chains. So plants make their own food. We call them primary producers, but that supports the lives of others that consume the plants. So animals eat the plants, and then animals eat other animals that eat the plants, and so you can support more and more complex food chains and food webs, all because some of these creatures are making their own food by utilizing a totally different energy source, the sun. Now here's another curious fact about the chloroplasts. In this picture here, it appears that these chloroplasts are dividing. And these are structures then that appear to be dividing inside of a plant cell. Now we know that cells can reproduce. One cell can split into two cells, and this is, how living things can reproduce, because cells can reproduce. But here we see the chloroplasts appear to be reproducing. Well, what's that all about? Were they once cells in the past that have retained this ability? Well, modern scientists have learned two more things about these chloroplasts that might help us understand the ability of chloroplasts to reproduce. One is that they're roughly the size of bacteria, and two, they have their own DNA that takes a form similar to bacteria DNA. And so in the 1970s, scientists started to become convinced with all this gathering evidence that these chloroplasts were once free-living bacteria. And in this picture, we see what scientists think happens roughly 2 billion years ago. Here we have a bacterium that has evolved photosynthesis. It's a cyanobacterium. And so photosynthesis was first invented by bacteria. But then roughly 2 billion years ago, a larger cell tried to tried to eat the cyanobacterium, but failed to digest it. And so now we have a living photosynthetic bacterium living inside of a larger cell that previously could not do photosynthesis. Well, the arrangement was mutually beneficial. And now we have a situation where the larger cell has gained this ability to do photosynthesis because it has within it these green cyanobacteria that continued to reproduce, continued to do photosynthesis, and then shared some of that glucose with the larger cell. The larger cell offered protection for the cyanobacteria. So this cell that has now gained the capacity for photosynthesis would be the single-celled ancestor of all future multicellular plants. So cyanobacteria invented photosynthesis, allowing them to make their own food. On the left here, this is a picture of cyanobacteria. Actually, the individual cells are stuck together into these filaments here. Later life forms stole their invention. As we just saw, one cell sort of tried to eat some cyanobacteria and failed to digest, but then that cell was the ancestor of multi-celled plants. Plants can do photosynthesis today because cyanobacteria invented it long ago. Now here's another important consequence of photosynthesis. Ever since cyanobacteria invented photosynthesis some 2 to 3 billion years ago, and here we have a single-celled photosynthetic euglena and multi-celled plants. Well, photosynthesis for 2 to 3 billion years has been producing oxygen that accumulated in the atmosphere. And so, quite literally, photosynthesis changed the atmosphere of the entire planet. And from the point of view of one animal species on planet Earth, so we humans are animals, photosynthesis was incredibly important because this high level of oxygen in the atmosphere was a necessity, a requirement for the later evolution of animals on the planet. So without photosynthesis, the future evolution of animals would not have been possible. And if we step further back, we can really appreciate the significance of photosynthesis. When life first evolved on the planet, they were simple cells that had to eat molecules. Here we see a scene on the left here, an undersea volcanic vent. Perhaps these rocky nurseries gave birth to the first living cells. This would be the origin of life. But they had to eat. They had to consume molecules in their environment. So the first life forms were using chemical energy on the planet. Meanwhile, all the planets were orbiting this giant energy source, but no living things on Earth had yet been able to tap into that energy source until the evolution of photosynthesis by cyanobacteria. They were the ones that were able to tap into this abundant and reliable energy source, and it really changed the game for life on planet Earth. So, to summarize then, if we don't have an education and we look at chloroplasts, we might have this kind of thought: oh, look at the pretty green things. But with an education, we can understand chloroplasts much more deeply. They are the site of photosynthesis, a most important innovation of the history of life. They were once free-living bacteria whose capacities were stolen by later life. They're sugar factories that support complex food webs. They changed our planet's atmosphere by releasing oxygen, making animal life possible. And so chloroplasts and the cyanobacteria before them, they tapped into energy from a nearby star. That's a pretty cool trick. So this is what an education can do for you. We can look with new eyes upon these pretty green discs, and we can understand more deeply what they are, how they came to be, and their significance for life on planet Earth and ourselves. So these green discs are the site of photosynthesis, a most important innovation in the history of life. They were once free-living bacteria whose capacities were stolen by later life forms. They are sugar factories that support complex food webs. They changed our planet's atmosphere with the release of oxygen, making animal life possible. And they tapped into energy from a nearby star. That's a pretty cool trick. Living things were now powered by an energy source 93 million miles away. So again, an education can equip us with new eyes with which to see the world. And most people report that is a more pleasurable way to go through life, having a deeper understanding and appreciation for the world around us.